Welcome to the Politics of Peterborough podcast. I'm your host, Dave Adcock. In the coming weeks, voters in Peterborough will head to the polls in the 2026 local elections to decide who should represent them on the council for at least the next 2 years and shape the city's future. In this mini-series of episodes, I'm speaking to representatives from each of the political parties currently represented on Peterborough City Council to understand their priorities, their ideas for the city, and how they believe the council should be run as we approach local government reorganisation. To make it easy for you to compare the parties, each representative in the series was being asked the same core set of questions: their party's vision, priorities, local government reorganisation, council's finances, local plan, housing and growth, and their record on the council. We'll then finish with some party-specific questions around the upcoming election and from you, the listener. In this episode, representing the Green Party are Councillor Heather Skibsted, the group leader on the council, and Councillor Imtiaz Ali, the chair of Peterborough Green Party. Councillor Skibsted, Councillor Ali, welcome to the Politics of Peterborough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's start big picture. What's your party's clear vision for Peterborough until the completion of the local government reorganisation, if you make a significant number of gains in May?
So I think the first thing you've got to realise is a number of outward-facing Peterborough City Council services are experienced by people, the residents of the city, based on how well the officers conduct their roles. Now, they've got a certain remit, and between these local elections and local government reorganisation, there's not a massive amount of time. You're probably talking 12 to 24 months going on the existing timelines. I think if we make gains, I think all that will mean is that will amplify our voice. And I think what we do is we use our voice to represent residents as best we can, being in a position of opposition, which we have been for a while. I think Greens are known to be very, very active in their local wards. I think we're very, very reactive to residents' concerns. So we make sure, the day-to-day council services are being run efficiently and effectively for our residents, but also things that maybe have more of a life impact. So things like, people waiting on housing lists or people getting special educational needs certification and those kinds of things. We really try and chase upon that on behalf of our residents. So I think, our big plan between now and local government reorganisation is to consolidate in the position that we have. We've gone from 2 councillors to 5. We're getting a louder voice. We're hoping to go to 10 come this May. And then that will give us more influence, and that will ensure that we can put more pressure on council officers to deliver on the services that they've promised to the residents of Peterborough.
I would fully endorse that. I think we already do speak out strongly certainly at council meetings, at budget meetings. We are always pushing to try and make the services better, to ensure that things get done, which can be quite difficult at times. We've put through motions and for a small group, we've put through several motions, and we do sort of pose difficult questions sometimes to officers and make sure things are actually working. And as Imtiaz said, in the wards, we are very active, pick up casework all the time and use that to push forward. For example, I've been quite active on the fly tipping, trying to push on that. We know that there's an issue around potholes. That's something that comes up all the time. Housing is a big issue. In our ward, we're both in the same ward in Alton Longville. There's a big issue with HMOs, which means that there's a lot of pressure on parking, and there are lots of issues, and there's a certain amount of neglect has gone on in our ward, and that's difficult because there isn't the funding to address that, and we see that, and we can see residents are not happy with that. They are paying more council tax and are not seeing better services. So we'd like to be able to see more results. I would like to be able to say, this is what you said and this is what we've managed to do for you. So I think that's really important to us.
What would the noticeable differences be for residents of the city if your party were to gain a greater number of councillors after the election?
So our national tagline is making hope normal again. And I think it's changed recently, hasn't it? Hope is here, it's all of us. That's the new tagline. So it's all about hope. I think
hope versus hate.
Yeah, hope versus hate. So we're in this climate now where it's very much is becoming a little bit almost bipolar, our politics, and people are being pushed to the fringes both on the right and on the left. And you can argue that we've probably benefited a little bit from that because people don't find what they're looking for on the left in what was Labour, the current government, and the current administration. So we've definitely benefited from that. I think people will find a voice of hope. I think people will find a politics which points towards, genuinely researched, genuinely statistically based, evidence-based policy that will improve the lives of citizens. So on a national level, we'll probably talk about this later, but things like the wealth tax, for example, and universal basic income and renationalisation of our utilities, which we'll go on to that later. But those kinds of things, they're not just like nice to haves and almost like a tick list for lefty politicians. They're actual genuine things that people think will make a difference to their day-to-day. Just the privatisation of the utilities has meant people can get their power cut off, their water cut off if they fail to pay. They fall behind 2 months, 3 months. As a government or as a local council, if you were managing those kinds of services, would you want to cut off a single mum with 2 young children from electricity, from water? And those kinds of considerations are a little bit different because there's a lot more of a paternalistic view of government when they're looking after those utilities. So I genuinely think that message of hope will come out. Day to day, we'd like to improve access to social housing for people who need housing. We'd like to improve more services around children in residential care. We're looking to push Peterborough City Council to open up their own residential cares to look after children, give them the best outcomes. And we're trying to connect the dots for a number of these different services because children in care end up becoming adults in care, and children in care end up becoming unemployed adults or adults that are involved in crimes and are arrested. So all those services we're trying to just bring together and then give people the hope to think, there is genuinely a reason to try and get yourself out of the rut that you're in and try and improve your lives.
We've all got our within the group, we've got different areas that we work on. I, for example, have been quite involved in the active travel side of things. So I've been on the, as a group for cycling and walking, sort of pushing towards having better routes for cyclists and people that walk. That is there's room for a lot of improvement in this city. For example, our deputy leader, Nicola, she's been working a lot on environmental issues, and Imtiaz has worked on some of the budgetary things that we'll talk about later. But we sort of have our areas that we work on, and I would like to see, for example, with the active travel, I'm working in a cabinet working group to see better cycle paths so that they have lots of. What happens in the council, they often have sort of policy areas, but they don't join them up with other things. And I'd like to see things joined up more. For example, last night we were talking about let's get Peterborough active. There's a new initiative about that. But you've also got to make it affordable for people to be able to do that. So I'd like more of the council departments to work together, more joined up thinking to make it accessible to all residents.
Peterborough is bidding to be the UK City of Culture in 2029. Is your party behind the bid, and what do you think is the city's strongest cultural selling point?
I'm fully behind it. I think we're fully behind it. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to show. Peterborough gets a bad press. I've lived here 13 years, and I don't think it's that bad. I think it could be improved, but I think there's some wonderful aspects. The city centre, that there could be some improvements in the middle of the city, but I think we've got the cathedral, we've got the Lido, which I've worked extremely hard and championed for quite a while. I think those things are amazing. I would have loved that Lido when I was growing up, and I think it's been undervalued, not prioritised enough. But that sort of seems to be happening now. So those things in the city centre, we've also got things further out. We've got a very diverse community. We've got Flag Fen. We've got quite a lot of cultural areas that could be enhanced and made more of. But I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to work on those things and give Peterborough a better name. That's my view. Sorry, just to add, we've got a huge number. It's an incredibly diverse city, and I think we should celebrate that. I used to live in a city that wasn't as diverse, and I think it's a strength of the city. Lots of different communities with their community groups, and I think that should be celebrated.
Lincoln Road gets a lot of bad press in whenever there's anything on the Peterborough Telegraph about Millfield and Lincoln Road. You get all the comments under the sun, and I try and go on there, not as a troll, but genuinely to invite people to come down to Lincoln Road. And I've done this. I actually tried to make a date with someone who was like, he was really, cutting it to pieces. And I said, well, actually, Lincoln Road, you can go down Lincoln Road, you can have yourself like a Portuguese coffee shop, get yourself a coffee, you can go for an Arab shawarma, and then you can go for a shisha cafe and get some desserts. And it's actually a wonderful place. And it's like you say, it's a melting pot of different cultures. You've probably got like over 100 different nationalities in and around Peterborough, and a lot of them seem to gravitate towards Lincoln Road. So it's got a bit of everything for everyone. And I genuinely do think that's something to be proud of. Like, you don't want it to be same old. And I'd say, that just touches on to your point in terms of the variety that we have in Peterborough.
I love it. I think it's great.
The government is currently pursuing local government reorganisation, with Peterborough City Council due to merge with at least part of, if not multiple, neighbouring district councils. Firstly, what's your party's view on the idea as a whole?
Well, we voted for option D as a group, which was the Greater Peterborough option, which is, so it's the slightly smaller the unitary authority. We are already in a unitary authority, but it's slightly smaller than the other ones they're proposing. And the argument against that is that it's more expensive. I believe that it would be better in terms of Peterborough retaining its identity. I think merging with, I think it was Fenland and Huntingdonshire would make it a bit more of a sort of amorphous mass, and also big, and people, I think Peterborough City Council, now people know they're part of that city. Well, if it's that much bigger, it would seem, I don't know how people would feel about that, how you'd feel like it was this huge organisation. I don't know, I can't see that working, but yeah, maybe it will if that's what they choose. But we chose the slightly smaller option with the sort of more, keeping the identity of Peterborough. So that's where we were with that. Have you got any more to add on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think LGR is, in its entirety, I think I understand the concept, and I feel like residents, their experience of their council, whoever's running the services that they rely on, they would much rather a smaller council than a bigger council. I think the bigger the council, the more distance you feel you have between you and the actual service providers. It's a bit like when you start outsourcing bits of work that the council does. Things like issues with Aragon. Like do you contact Aragon? Do you contact the city council? Issues with social housing. Is it Cross Keys? Is it Accent Neen? Is it the council? Is it my housing officer? Who do I speak to? So I think local government reorganisation will make it a little bit more difficult for the residents to be able to speak to someone, face-to-face human, and actually get responses to their questions and queries. So in that sense, me personally, I'm against the bigger, the wider LGR. But as a group, I think we don't operate a whip. Everybody's got their own opinions. We try and come to some kind of consensus. And with this thing, I don't think councillors were actually given a choice of whether or not we should pursue LGR. It was, you're doing it, and you're going to do it with either this one or that one, and then you can have a consultation. And even then, it's down to national government, right, to determine who we get joined up with. So I'm a little bit skeptical about these kinds of reorganisations where I don't get a say on whether we do it or not. I can offer my opinion, but it may or may not be taken into account, and they're going to do what they're going to do anyway. So it's almost a foregone conclusion.
It does feel a bit like that, yeah.
The council is still £500 million in debt with depleted cash reserves, but will find itself in a significant increase in core funding from central government after the Fairer Funding Review. Where does your party believe the focus should be for that additional funding?
Absolutely to protect statutory services. And in the past, I've heard discussions around how we can protect statutory services but reduce the level at which we provide them, if you know what I mean. So there might be like a whole menu of things that we offer on a particular statutory service and reduce that menu of items. Do fewer home visits, for example, fewer 24-hour cares for adults in care and those kinds of things. And I feel like we need to protect and maximise the residents' experience of those kinds of services. Certainly, adult social care and children's services need to be looked after. Obviously, homeless provision needs to be looked after. So things that actually have life-changing impacts for our residents should be protected at all costs, and we should be trying to manage those as best we possibly can. Beyond that, there was some talk, and we just passed a budget recently, didn't we? And it looks like the next 3 years we're looking to replenish some of our reserves. And that's something that we're going to be very, very focused on, because we've had balanced budgets for the last 2 years that I've been on the council. The last 2 years we've had balanced budgets, and both years we've come in at a shortfall. And it's not an insignificant shortfall. We're talking, 4, 5, 6, 7 million pounds, and that gets eaten up from the reserve, the general reserve. So we're going to be looking at that very, very carefully. We're going to be looking at the savings very, very carefully that they've already projected, and we're going to be looking at the projects that the council have committed to and make sure that they follow through. One of the things that we really tried to push was for the city council to run its own children's home last year, and we had £2 million from the capital budget put into the budget that we passed. And over the last 12 months, there's been pretty much minimal progress. And that's an invest to save type item. So yeah, we're really going to kick the tires on that.
We'd like to see a housing revenue account with buying our own council houses. We don't have our own council houses, and we have an enormous shortage of social housing. So looking further forward, that would be something we would think would be really important to be aiming for. I'm on the scrutiny committee for, I think it's called Prevention, Resilience and Independence now. It used to be called Health. And they were saying that adult social care is incredibly underfunded. And to me, that seems the government need to fund that. And it shouldn't be the job of local government, because the increase is going to be rising steadily from now on, sort of enormously in the next sort of 15 years. So the government needs to step in and deal with that. Otherwise, we will continue to be underfunded and have these same problems year after year after year. So that has to be looked at and prioritised.
Many residents feel that they continue to pay more in council tax year on year, but see little improvement in services, with no end to those increases in sight. How would your party ensure that residents feel that they get better value for money out of the council?
That's a really tricky one.
That's a tricky question. Yeah.
I think we always, whenever we present a budget, we always say, "Oh, we're protecting these services, but there's some cuts," right? And then residents think they're protecting the services they're already providing. They're cutting these services, therefore their overall expenditure should come down. My council tax is going up. Where is the surplus money going? So I think it's a genuinely good question. I think residents probably need to be made more aware of the amount of work that the council do. But then communicating that is difficult as well, because we used to have the booklet that used to go out with the annual council tax, and how many people actually read the booklet and see exactly what's been provided for what you're being charged for. I think we have to have more face-to-face conversations with residents as councillors. I think more councillors need to take it upon themselves to understand what residents' concerns are and actually communicate those in the council. And if there are genuine answers to that question, I've asked the same question myself. Council tax is going up year on year. It's going up by 5%. RPI, I know recently it's gone up to 7, 8, 9, 10%, but RPI traditionally or historically over the last 20 years has been around the 2.5%, 3% mark. So if our employees, council employees, their salaries aren't going up by 5%. Their salaries are going up by 2.5%, 3%. So if salaries aren't going up that high, RPI is not going up that high, council tax is, and services are being cut, then it is a legitimate question.
It is.
Where is that money going? Some of it is, of course, demand-led. So adult social care, children's, the demand-led services, homelessness, it's demand-led services. So we can't really control that. And maybe it's a failing on some of the other national government's policies that we see an increase in demand in those services. But some of it has to be efficiencies.
It does.
You have to, I don't want to, say we need to cut it down to but we're outsourcing a lot of money, and a lot of these companies are doing what we used to do, but they're doing it at cost price plus profit, whereas we would do it at cost price. So I'm sure we save 15 to 20% there.
We need to see, there was a question, one of the councillors raised at the last full council, I think it was, about resources, and it seems that we're lacking resources to do the things that people notice, like mending potholes and those sorts of things, picking up fly tipping and sorting out the fly tipping, which has been going on for years, we know that. So they need to see those results. That needs to be more communicated about what's being done, how much is being done, so they can actually see that there's improvement. At the moment, it's really hard for them to see those improvements. I would really push, and we do ask questions at full council, but sometimes it feels like you ask a question, you get an answer, and then it stays the same. So I'd like to see more action, maybe put some money into more resources, of officer resources, to get these visible things done for residents.
On the potholes thing, I'm pretty sure we've outsourced our contracts. Is it Milestone? So we've got a company that looks to repair roads and so on. I don't know if we've still got an in-house service, even if it's a very small one. That's something that I probably need to pick up on. Yeah. But to have your own little truck and just a few employees that specialise in mending potholes. And the moment a report comes in, you don't have to worry about getting your contracted services to issue your quote and for them to accumulate a certain amount of work before they can then give you a bill which allows for, a full day's shift and a full mix of tarmac or bitumen or whatever they're going to use, and allow for the profit on top. But you've got your own in-house team that can go out. Now, if they were to employ, 3 or 4 road specialists just to do that work, they would be busy, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the whole year. And you probably wouldn't have to think about them being surplus to requirement for the next 2 or 3 years, given that the state our roads are in at the moment.
Some of the financial decisions made by the council in recent years have been questioned by the public. Loaning £15 million to a developer for the construction of the Hilton Hotel, and the attempts to sell the building which houses the Bharat Hindu Samaj are 2 such examples. What would your party do to improve transparency and rebuild public trust in the council's financial decision making?
So interesting you've joined those 2 together. So I'm somewhat familiar with both, just being obviously on the budget. So the Hilton Hotel, from my understanding, certainly all the discussions we've had in FSWG was it was supposed to be a joint operation between the council and the construction company or the building company, and they had an agreement with Hilton Hotels to come in and purchase the building once it was complete. And I don't know if it was an 80-20 arrangement or a 90-10 arrangement where the council paid most of it, and then the building firm or the construction company would pay the rest. What happened was there was no scrutiny or oversight in terms of how much money was being spent and what stage the development got to. And as a result, it got to a point where the builders decided they couldn't complete it. They'd have to put in a lot more money than they thought they would have. And they basically just up and left, and we were left with this massive asset that we didn't know what to do with. And now we're probably going to sell it, and we're probably going to sell it at a massive loss. I think sales in progress. I don't know where that's got to so far.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think due diligence is key. What is the level of due diligence within a particular project? And that looks like, certainly, this was before my time, but it looks like there was very limited due diligence. It was very, very quickly done without the right controls in place. I think if you look at it at arm's length, it looked like a fantastic deal if you just look at the numbers on a spreadsheet, but life isn't a spreadsheet and you have to have controls in place. So due diligence and controls in place, absolutely, risk monitoring, and having a bespoke team. On the Bharat Hindu Samaj temple, I don't know what the issue with that sale is. So as far as I understand it, there was an asset, the New England complex, which had 7 tenants. From what I understand, I might be wrong, but 6 of them were paying rent regularly. I think the Bharat Hindu Samaj hadn't paid rent for about 10 years, as far as I understand it. I might need to check my numbers. And then they were in negotiations with the council for a number of years on buying the overall complex. And the sale fell through. I believe the sale fell through at £1 for the entire complex, which is worth about £2 million. The sale fell through at £1 because there was a number of repairs that the Bharat Hindu Samaj insisted the council pay for before they bought the asset. This is my understanding. It might not be, it's probably best to go to the officers for, actual matter of fact, but certainly my understanding. Off the back of that, the asset found its way onto the asset list for disposals. So the council did an exercise where they identified all the assets that weren't generating a profit. And then that list as disposals was a public document. So it was publicly available for sale. Then what the council said was, given it's currently being used as community use, it's going to be open only to community organisations, and community organisations can bid. And then they set up a property board. The council set up a property board, and they set up a document that outlined the way in which they would consider bids. And then they considered the bids at the property board. Officers ran the process, and they deemed one bid to be better than the other, and they recommended that to Cabinet. Now, the only thing that was a little bit dubious was, did Cabinet have all the necessary information for them to make that decision? And that's what scrutiny called up and said, maybe this needs to go back to Cabinet with this additional bit of information, and then they can decide whether they change their decision or retain their decision. And they chose to retain their decision. So I feel like that process has been above board, and I think that it's been made for the right reasons. It's still a community asset. It's still in community hands. And the council wouldn't be putting assets up for sale if it didn't need money. We are a cash-strapped council. You said yourself, £500 million in debt. So we can't be selling, assets worth £2 million for a pound.
I think it's gone into the press as being quite a controversial issue, and as if they're being sort of penalised as a community and so on. So, but I don't know if all the facts are being put out there when these articles are being written, like in the Peterborough Telegraph. It does seem to be just giving one side of it. It isn't giving all the factual evidence. So that I think that's caused quite a stir in the sort of the local communities.
So is that something perhaps the council needs to be better at?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've often said that they need more myth-busting stuff. I mean, people always mention the Hilton, for example. Oh, we'd be able to have this done if it wasn't for the Hilton Hotel. I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that. There are different pots of money. It's like the Signet Bridge that they're building. They said if we didn't have that, we could have, I could get a council house or something. It's not like that. And I think that does need to be explained more often and in simple terms, because it is complicated. And if you're not in the council, you don't always know how things are run. I'm not saying that things could perhaps have been done better, and as Imtiaz says, with more due diligence, but it's not quite as simplistic as sometimes it's led to. You can, when you read the comments, that it's quite as simple as that.
Under the current local plan, which is currently in development, there are significant housing or industrial development sites earmarked for the outskirts of Castor, Wittering and Stanground. How would your party balance housing and economic growth needs with the protection of green spaces?
Green spaces are enormously important. The government have got a target of building, is it 1 million homes a year or something? I can't remember exactly. Do you know the number?
I don't know the exact number.
But they have a very high number of houses they want to build per year. I'm on the planning committee, so I get to see the planning, the applications that come along. For example, we had the showground application, and that's all been abandoned now because it wasn't. If they create these new developments, they have to be done with proper. They have to think them through properly about how it's going to work for the local community, whether the facilities, the infrastructure, all those things. And sometimes these things don't seem to be planned as well as they could. And I think that's incredibly important. I can understand people in Castor and so on being very worried because it's a beautiful area around there. But I haven't actually seen the plans for that. But I think you've got to take each one on its own merit and see where it is. Is it needed? Does it need to be that big? I mean, for example, the showground one was enormous. It was 1,500. And in the local plan, it said half that. It said, and I was on the planning committee where I was voting for one but not the other, because I thought it was fine for the 750 or 850 or whatever it was, but not 1,500. And so that's all happened now. But I think you have to look at it, each one on its own merit, and see where it is, if it's been planned properly, the infrastructures there, the cycle paths, all those things have to be taken into account. And sometimes it doesn't seem that it is.
Yeah, there's definitely a need for housing.
Yeah.
There's also a need for like the right type of housing as well. So, there needs to be a lot more done for first-time buyers. There needs to be a lot more done in terms of affordable housing and social housing. And I don't know enough about how it works, but I just feel like even when they say it's an affordable house, it's like £260,000. And as a first-time buyer, if you're earning £25,000 a year, that's 10 times your salary. How are you going to afford £260,000 unless you've got somebody who's wealthy in your family, maybe a parent or something who can give you a massive lump sum. And then if you're not buying and you're renting at £1,000, £1,200, £1,400 a month. So how do you even say the deposit? So I think some serious thought needs to be put into just building houses. In terms of your question around growth versus green space, I think you can have developments that are quite sensitive to the green space and quite, they include it within the development. Hampton, I think, is a really good example of a relatively new development, which has got lots and lots. It's got a lake, it's got lots of green space, it's got mini parks, all within the house. So you're driving down, and on one side you've got houses, and on the other side you've got a lovely bit of green space. So that's almost like it becomes part of your day-to-day, the green space. So you can always retain that, I think, for the residents in that locality. if your question was, what about the green space of the people who currently live there, who are going to see this massive development? But that's when populations grow, you need more houses. Where do you put them? We're not going to put more houses in Central, are we? There's hardly.
But we do
anything
need
green.
more social housing. That's what's not being built.
Yeah,
so, for example, with the showground, there wasn't going to be any social housing. They called it affordable, but not social housing, and we desperately need that. People are living in private rented accommodation, which is enormously expensive. So that's a huge need that we need to address. As you say, not these expensive owner-occupied houses. So we need a combination of both, well thought out.
With the pace of population growth in the city over the last 2 decades, many feel that the accompanying infrastructure hasn't kept pace, with a lack of doctors, dentists, hospital beds, leisure facilities, etc. What would your party do to ensure that A, these deficits are rectified, and B, that future development won't see a repeat of this situation?
That's definitely national policy.
Yeah.
And our party is absolutely crystal clear on the need for massive investments in the NHS. We're probably the strongest when it comes to the NHS. If you look at the weight, and so I was born in this country. I was going to the doctors in the 80s and 90s, and literally my mum would ring up or my sister would ring up at 10:30 and we get an appointment at 11:45. And then we'd go in, the little buzzer would sound, and I'd go in there and see my GP, and it'd be the same GP. And that's probably because GPs had, 5,000 patients per GP. Now was it up to about 10 to 12,000 patients per GP. So there's a massive underinvestment in the NHS. There's fewer GPs per capita. And with the pace of growth being rectified, that would just demand a massive increase in the investments in the NHS. I was, unfortunately, in Peterborough City Hospital just last week, and I was wondering why they'd closed down Peterborough District Hospital. Because given the rate of growth, you probably needed an additional hospital, not a slightly bigger hospital. And had PDH stayed where it was, it could have serviced parts of the south of the city or central areas of the city, and PCH would have been a little bit more accessible to maybe the rural communities and people coming from a little bit further afield. So, yeah, I think our party is definitely very, very conscious of population growth versus underinvestment in the NHS. And we have to be very careful not to pin all of the reduction in services on population growth, because there has been a genuine reduction in the investment in the NHS over a couple of decades now. And because of that, even with no population growth, we would probably had a worse service now than we would have had 20 years ago.
We also had a lack of recruitment of it's not, doctors are going abroad. They don't want to stay. The conditions under which they work are not good. They're not paid very much. Nurses as well. So we need a massive recruitment drive to get more trained and working. And we've got a shortage, basically. And I've heard that in East Anglia, we've got one of the biggest shortages of GPs in the country. So it is on a national level, yeah.
Several development and redevelopment projects have been long planned but are yet to be realised. The examples of such: the Hilton Hotel, North Westgate, a new purpose for the Guildhall, a new stadium for Peterborough United. How would your party get these projects completed while ensuring they genuinely benefit residents, businesses and visitors?
That's a difficult question for a party that's been in opposition and hasn't seen the details and hasn't seen the reasons why these developments haven't gone on. North Westgate's been going on for 15 years, maybe more. They've bought a whole block of housing. So the very start of Cromwell Road, there was about 50 to 60 houses, and they were purchased off of the owners, and they've just been left in a complete state, and they've probably become drug dens and probably become like hangouts for people who drink alcohol and antisocial behaviour, graffiti and all sorts. So there's a massive failing there. You'd like to think that our party would ensure that we had proper controls in place, a really risk-assessed plan of action for project management, regular touch points for progress, and make sure that the funding is there in advance, the investors are in advance, we get contracts signed up in advance, and then push it through. But
because if we were in administration, we'd have at least one, or maybe a joint administration, but we'd have at least one or two of us on the cabinet, so we'd have a lot more knowledge of what's going on. We don't know the ins and outs of cabinet meetings at the moment, so what goes on.
Based on your party's record on Peterborough City Council, why should voters trust you with an increased number of councillors, which might give you more of a leadership role going forwards?
Well, I think we're hard working, I would say. We work really hard within our wards. We work hard on the council. We represent several committees between us. For a small party, we're represented in lots of different areas, and extra. We take on extra work as well. So I think we're definitely there to serve the residents that we've been who've voted for us. And I think if we have more people, we can do more of that, I would say.
And I think I said earlier as well, like a lot of the delivery from the council comes from officers. Councillors don't actually deliver much. They can push people to deliver stuff and they can put pressure on and they can, play political games to get something pushed ahead of other things and so on. And lots of councillors do that. But if you look at the makeup of the council, there's 60 councillors, of which 5 are green at the moment. And we do punch above our weight. We've got very, very high standards set by the leader, the deputy leader, Heather and Nicola. There's a demand from councillors to try and do a street surgery every single week or every other week, see our residents regularly, move around the whole ward, get a really good flavour of what's going on in our wards, and then communicate that up to the people that actually make the decisions and deliver the services. So in terms of just serving the needs of our residents, I feel like we do a really good job. And that's not to say others don't. There's some really good councillors on the city council. I could name you 4 or 5 in other parties outside of the Green Party. But like Heather said, like we're very strong.
We're known. I mean, I'm known by officers for giving them work to do.
Yeah,
certainly,
which is probably not a good thing.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, others, they don't hear from very often. But I mean, they know that I'm there. I'm in there. If there's something going on, I'll be there. I'll be reminding what's going on. It's part of what we're supposed to be doing. So yeah, we do it.
It's almost a certainty that the council will remain in no overall control after May's elections. What is your party's approach to coalition or cross-party working going forwards?
Well, I would say that as Greens, as a small political party, growing political party, but still small in comparison to others, we were probably nationally we're probably mainly in coalitions. Green groups are mainly in coalitions. I think there's 1 or 2 fully green councils in the UK, aren't there? I think Bristol and maybe Mid Suffolk. But otherwise, they're mainly in coalitions. And I think we are good at working with other people. I think we go to cross-party, like the FSWG, and we will work with others, but we will also strongly put our views forward. I think certainly we would work in a coalition and expect to do so, certainly in this council.
There's some parties that we would never go into coalition with.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, I didn't mention that, but that's absolutely true.
Absolutely never go into coalition with. And if we did, it would probably make us rethink our identity.
Yeah, we could.
I think we know who we are as a political party.
Are you going to say who they are?
I think it's obvious who they are, but there's some parties that we absolutely could not go into coalition with. So depending on how things land, there will of course be discussions. But you also have to understand that parties may not necessarily want to go into coalition with us. We may come across as exceptionally nice people, but we're not liked by everyone. So yeah, I agree with Heather. I think we work at FSWG really well. We chair a scrutiny, we vice chair a scrutiny. So we do support the council. We try and get the best for our residents. But if coalition meant we would have to vote as a single unitary block, that would never work. We don't have a whip within the Green Party. We wouldn't expect a whip.
We try and reach a consensus if we can, but we certainly wouldn't force anybody who has a strong view. I mean, last year we didn't all vote the same on the budget, did we?
No.
But this year we did. But that's because the budget was a lot better this year, so it's a lot different. So yeah, but he's absolutely right. Some parties we couldn't work with.
In a recent BBC radio interview, Councillor Ali, you stated that a good result for the Greens would be doubling the number of councillors that you currently have. Does that mean that anything less than that, so which would take you up to 10 councillors, is a bad or disappointing result?
Yes. Yes, it is for me. So I became chair of the Green Party in Peterborough about 2 years ago, and at the time I'd just joined, so we were at 3 councillors. We were 4 councillors. We were 4 councillors, but then I lost my seat, and we had a defection. So we went down to 2 councillors. So my reign really started at 2 councillors. We got up to 4 at the last election, and we had a defection in to make it 5. And now if you look at national polling, like, I feel like there's a wave of optimism around the country, and it's really being, those flames of hope are being fanned by Zach Polanski and the wider Green activists all on the ground up and down the country. And I genuinely feel like a lot of people feel like this is their new home. Heather will tell you as well, there's so many people that we knew from our old Labour days that have completely lost any faith in Labour whatsoever. And either they're activists for us or members with us. There's a large move, and that's because Labour traditionally used to sit on the left of politics. It no longer sits there. People's politics don't change. Parties might change, but people, it's very difficult to change people's politics. And I think those people have looked for a new home and seen the work that we've done, and they like the noises being made by our leadership. So I would personally be disappointed, but I think as a small party who've only ever had 1 councillor and then 2 and then 3, to now be on 5, we're on the highest ever. We expect to be net positive after May. So it will be the most number of councillors we've ever had. But for me personally, I think if you set a goal, I think let's try and hit it. And I'd love for us to get to 10, yeah.
In 2023 and 24 local elections, the Greens were on around 14% of the vote in Peterborough. Are you hoping to get north of 20% this time around, given the improvement in the national polling situation?
Yes, I would say absolutely we are, yeah. It's a big difference from what it was 2 years ago. Very big difference.
I would just add, though, so that's based on us fielding candidates in every single ward. If we don't field candidates in wards, then you'd have to remove that data and then do what's our vote share in the votes that we've contested, in which case, we'd expect to get more than 20%.
The Conservatives have topped the polling in Peterborough every local elections going back to 1997. Do you think that this might be the year that we see that streak broken?
Yes, unequivocally. I mean, people can, talk about national politics till the results come in, but there's no doubt the Conservatives have lost a massive portion of their right-wing support, or some people might say far right, but certainly right-wing support to reform. And if you think, okay, well, they've lost half of their votes there, then they're going to be on a hiding to nothing.
But I started in the council in 2019, and there were 30 Conservative councillors. And even before reform became sort of up and coming, I mean, they've gone down to 10. So it's a big change in the time I've been there. So yes, I don't believe that that's going to be the case this time. Absolutely not. A big change in the established parties losing votes, and the more fringe parties, not fringe exactly, but the smaller parties on the uprising.
How much of your campaigning at this local election will be focused on local issues, and how much will be about national and international issues?
Well, it's a local election, so we talk about local issues, about what we'll do for the people in that ward that we're campaigning in. But things come up on the doorstep, so people ask about, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? And we obviously, need to respond to that. So, and we are a party with those beliefs and values and policies, and so that. But we're not sort of at a local election. We're not spending a lot of time doing that. We're talking about what, like I've been in the ward for 7 years. And I know it really well. I know the issues really well, and people like that. People want that. Most people do. I would say that the majority of people are more interested in that than anything else.
So the Greens have got like a whole spectrum of policies, and some of those policies will appeal to some voters, and other policies will appeal to other voters. Which is why we've got such a mix of supporters, young, old, male, female, from all different walks of life, that do back the Green Party. And I think part of politics and part of doing well in elections is knowing what it is that you've got in your toolkit that would satisfy the voter that you're speaking to. And if certain voters really, really get annoyed with potholes, you have to tell them what you're going to do about potholes.
Yeah, of course you do.
You're not going to talk to them about the NHS, right? And if some portions of your electorate are very, very concerned about national issues, for example, funding the NHS, nationalisation of the water services. Like, was it last year, about 18 months ago, I wrote an article after there was a sewage dump from the Anglian water mains out near out near, I forget the name, out near the village. But I wrote an article for people in that area. If you spoke about nationalising the waters and actually not paying out dividends by reinvesting in our infrastructure, that would be very, very important to them. You could argue that's a national issue rather than a local issue, but it affects them locally. So I think part of politics is knowing what it is in your toolkit of policies that the resident would be most interested in hearing about in order to secure their vote.
And also each ward is a bit different. So the ward that we represent, Alton Longville, is very different from Central Ward. So the things that matter to the people in those two wards are very different. So yeah, we have a slightly different strategy for those, for campaigning.
Do you have any concerns that the view of the Green Party may be moving away from it being a party of the environment to being one of an anti-Israel party?
No, it's always been a party of the environment, and it still very much is. But it's expanded, and it's always. I mean, Nicola, who's been in the party longer than any of us, would say those policies, those social policies, have always been there, but they're being brought to the fore more by our current leader about social justice, about inequality, about distributing wealth. They've always been there, but they maybe not been talked about as much, but the environmental policies are very much still there. Absolutely, they are. So I would disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, Natalie Bennett says quite frequently. She says there's no environmental justice without social justice, right? And that's something that's kind of stuck with me as well. Like, you absolutely cannot be talking to people about paper straws when they can't get a house, right? When they're struggling with their rent, when they're struggling to pay for their electricity. You've seen the current international situation with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz right now, and the price of oil is spiking, and we're seeing it at the petrol stations. If you're driving petrol cars, you're seeing it at the petrol stations. So we need to be less reliant on oil, but that's what the Green Party has always been saying. There's a genuine reason for it. So all of our policies are thoroughly researched by people who are, experts in their field. And we just get like the buzz lines and we put them out to our electorate. But actually, they're very, very thoroughly researched. And there's nothing that's been watered down about our party in terms of our green credentials. We're certainly very, very strong Green Party. The second part of your question, is the Green Party now an anti-Israel party? I don't know where that comes from. I've got a sneaky suspicion it might be something to do with the party's stance on the current situation in Gaza. And I think if being, absolutely repulsed by 70, 80,000 people, unarmed residents, civilians, being massacred by an army armed to the hilt by the Americans and the British, and not being repulsed by that. I think anybody who's repulsed by that would equally be described as being anti-Israel, because there's been actions from all around the world. I've put a motion in myself asking for divestment of our pension funds from companies that invest in Israel because of the ongoing breaking of international laws and the committing of a genocide and operating an apartheid state.
It's anti-Israeli policy, isn't it? It's not anti-Israeli. It's anti-Israeli government policy. You'd say yes, it would be, because what's going on, what's happening.
As you mentioned earlier, both of you are formerly Labour councillors. Councillor Day also stood as a candidate for Labour before being elected as a Green, and Councillor Rangzeb was originally elected as a Conservative. What does this tell residents about the local Green Party and what it stands for?
It tells them that we are principled. We are very principled, and when party politics changes, we don't change with party politics. There's a lot of people in the current Labour Party I know who are, absolutely disgusted with the direction of the Labour Party, and they're sitting councillors, but because they're not brave enough, they choose to stay where they are. Genuinely, that is the case. I think with the Conservatives, you also saw a similar thing when Boris Johnson came in, and and Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak and some of their policies that moved the Conservative Party a little bit further to the right. There was a number of Conservative councillors who've since left, probably joined Peterborough First because of that shift to the right. So I think you got to look at the individual and say, has their moral compass moved, or has the party they used to represent moved? And I think certainly there's no argument that Labour is not the Labour of 20, 30 years ago.
The Labour Party I was in certainly changed. And as I said, when I resigned and joined the Greens, the party's changed. I haven't changed what I believe, and the Green Party policies are the ones I joined Labour for originally, back 10 years ago. So they're exactly the same, and that's what the Green Party now, represents for us.
Absolutely, we want a higher minimum wage. We want to nationalise our utilities. We want to invest in our NHS. We want to, make social housing more accessible.
I mean, Kessa was also in the Labour Party, wasn't he?
Kessa was a Labour member, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a kind of. So we've all been there, but that's because that's where the values and our morals and values come from. But that party's changed, so that's why we're where we are.
Some residents are concerned on recent reports that the Greens will look to decriminalise all drugs if they were to get into power. What can you tell us about that, and what impact would that have on Peterborough?
So, are you aware that this was a coordinated campaign of attack against the Green Party set out nationally and then filtered down to all
scupper the election in Gorton and Denton?
To scupper the by-election in Gorton and Denton.
Which it didn't do.
It was actually a disgusting tactic. It's a very, very dirty tactic to attack the Greens on a policy, which is, again, very well researched. And the biggest shock to me was the leader of the council, a registered GP, somebody who, deals day to day in medicine, professional, somebody whose opinion is respected, decided to parrot the lines that were issued from National Party and didn't care, what the impact would be. This policy that's been proposed, I'm not expert on every single Green Party policy, but from my understanding, this policy is very similar to the policy that was rolled out in Portugal around 20 to 25 years ago. And since then, every measurable metric has improved. Number of deaths from overdose has reduced, number of criminalizations has reduced, the amount of illegal drugs being trafficked in the country is reduced. There's so many different socioeconomic metrics that they track.
It's not just Portugal, is it? I mean, in Holland and Scandinavia, I believe they also. Zach talks about controlling and regulating drugs. He does, and yes, if that means decriminalisation, but it's about can regulate because the war on drugs hasn't worked. The way we've been doing hasn't worked, has it? It's literally made it worse. Probably it's pushed it all to the underworld and drug dealers and people suffering because of that. So
if you ask me personally, like, would I legalise all drugs? I probably wouldn't legalise all drugs. Me personally, because I don't take drugs and it doesn't affect me or my life individually. Can I see that there's a legitimate reason for it, and can I see that it would have health benefits and it would take a little bit more of the burden off the state, would reduce crime? Absolutely, I can see that. There's so many positive outcomes that could come from that kind of policy. So I think it's a good policy. I don't think with any policy, I don't think you'd get universal support, but I don't think all the scaremongering that.
Well, there was talk of giving crack cocaine to primary school children, which was completely absurd.
Yeah,
completely absurd.
I think
that was never ever mentioned.
I think people need to be a little bit more responsible.
And this is the Daily Mirror, not the Daily Mail, Daily Express, and parroting the tabloid press and using it. It's a dirty tactic.
Yeah.
What is the Greens' position on the embankment redevelopment plan, which was initially produced 4 years ago, but without any further action at this point?
Can't remember what it was. What was it?
We discussed it and we said we were always in favour of protecting green blue space, particularly in city centre locations. Yeah. So I think the embankment's an excellent space as it is. I mean, it could do with some development. It could have an improved offering to the residents of Peterborough.
It could be enhanced with more entertainment, more recreational facilities. It could look a lot nicer.
But this is the thing. Like, I think a lot of politicians won't say they're for a posh stadium there or against a posh stadium there, because if they're for it, they'll lose lots of votes from non-posh supporters, and if they're against it, they'll lose a lot of support from posh supporters. And I think that's a little bit, it's a little bit cowardly. Me personally, and again, I don't speak for the group. We'll all have our own opinions. Me personally, I would not want to put. And I'm big into football. I'm an NFA Level 2 qualified coach. I coach at FC Peterborough. I've been playing football all my life. Massive football fan. I would not have a football stadium on the embankment, because I think the embankment is a beautiful blue-green space. I think it needs to be protected. I think, we need to have, more festivals there, more cultural events there. We need to have more of an offering for people just to go there, like they go to Ferry Meadows, for example. But no.
If we're thinking of City of Culture, then it needs to be... I've seen some areas with rivers which are absolutely amazing, and I think it could be like that.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't include a football stadium. But it needs to be somewhere, maybe, maybe not quite like that position.
My final question is this. If listeners have a Green Party candidate in their ward in May, why should they vote for them?
Well, because they will work hard, they will listen, they will take their issues to council. The individual work, they'll also take the bigger issues to council. They'll champion their cause. They do it all year round, not just before elections. And they're principal people with the backing of a party that has a moral stance on things and will do the right thing for the people, I would say.
Yeah, and to add to that, so the wards that we're looking for people to vote for us in, our target wards, they're either going to be won by Reform or the Conservatives or Labour. And where they might be won by Labour, Labour's been in those wards for a number of years, and the residents know that they've failed to deliver. They should look at their ward with a Labour representative, and then they should look at green wards and compare the difference between how active the councillors are, how much work is being done, how many litter picks we arrange, how many bulky waste collections we arrange, how many street surgeries we run, how many leaflets we put out, how many times we communicate with our residents, how much casework we take, and compare that to their local councillor and realise that if they were to move to green, they would get a much better political representation.
One thing I say to people when I go on the door is, well, who else have you seen? Because we go around all year round, we do street surgeries all year round. Who else have you seen from other parties? There is one other councillor in our ward and no one knows who that person is because they're not visible from another party. So we send out literature all year round. So, if you want someone to represent you, then look and see what's going on around you rather than just voting for a party. And
vote, please vote. Like, even if it's not for the Greens, vote. Yeah. If you don't vote, you don't get marked on that register. If you don't get marked on the register, you're less likely to have somebody knock on your door and ask for your vote because people will think you're a non-voter. So if you want representation, you have to vote. Don't think you're going to get representation and then vote. It's the other way around.
That's a good point.
Councillor Skibsted, Councillor Ali, thank you for joining me on the Politics of Peterborough.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.